Fawer. Fawer. People here say Fawer. Fawer.
Fawer.
Fawer.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do
you're
it?
saying it with a slight Austrian accent. You're not mispronouncing it. You just have an accent. That's how I hear it.
That's different, yes, exactly.
Right.
Adam Fawer bugün bizlerle. First of all, I wanna say hoş geldin.
Teşekkürler.
So it's your second time in Turkey. How is life nowadays?
So I've been here about five days, and it's really surreal. I wrote my first book in 2002, and then I rewrote it in 2003. Got published in the U.S. in 2005, and then got published in Turkey in 2006. So meanwhile, by the time it was published in Turkey, it had already failed in the United States. So it didn't do well. Critically, people liked it, but commercially didn't have a lot of sales. And I had just finished my second book then, and I was trying to sell that. And in the U.S., no one wanted to buy it. And my first book was published in 20 languages. And my second, 3 languages. My big countries, Germany, Japan, and Turkey. And that's it. When I started writing, I was single. And by the time my second book came out, married, 2 boys, bought a place in Brooklyn. So suddenly I could not afford to be a writer anymore. And I thought that dream was dead. It was gone. So I went back to my normal life, which was working in startups, tech startups. And a couple years went by, and I would get Christmas cards from my Turkish publisher, Egeman, who I had never met before. And he's always like, I love you, you're my favorite author, and it makes me feel nice. But it seemed just foreign, unreal. I'd never been here. I vaguely knew I was popular here, but didn't really understand the extent. And then I started to get emails from Turkish fans, which was like really nice. And they would say like, when are you going to write another book? And I would feel bad because I'd stopped writing because I had to work to support my family. And then Egeman started calling me all the time on the phone. It was like a little depressing because he was calling to try to get me to do the thing that I loved, that I wanted to do, that I felt that I couldn't afford to do it anymore. And so I stopped taking his calls.
Wow.
And I would just let the calls go to voicemail. And it was 2009, I think it was September. He was calling me like all the time. And it was like a little weird, and I just didn't pick up. So I had like 1 month off where I had finished one job and I had 1 month to do nothing. And I was just gonna wallow in self-pity.
Yeah.
And then I got a call, and I look at my phone, and it's a number from Washington, D.C.
President calling?
So close. Well, not close, but some right direction. So I get a call, and I pick up the phone. I say, hello. And they say, we're calling for Adam Fawer. And I say, this is he. And the woman said, my name is so-and-so, and I'm calling from the United States State Department.
Okay, cool.
And I thought, holy shit.
What have I done wrong?
Like what? I thought, literally my thought was sort of ridiculous, but Hillary Clinton is mad at me because she was Secretary of State.
Okay.
And I thought, they must be calling because I have all these calls from Turkey that I don't answer. And maybe they think it's like suspicious in some way. So I was like a little freaked out. And she says, your Turkish publisher is trying to get in touch with you.
Oh my God.
So, and it was weird. It's like, no offense, why do you care that my Turkish publisher is trying to get in touch with me? And she said, every year, the American government flies one author over as a cultural emissary, and they really want it to be you. Would you do it? And I said, when? And it was going to be in like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and it was perfectly timed for the 1 month that I had off.
Do you think it's good timing, or do you think it's destiny?
I
Both, maybe.
It's a little of both, and I've been getting a lot of questions about a new term I learned since I've been here, Kadash. You know, and
What is it again?
Kadash,
Kadesh.
Kadesh,
Kardeş.
Kardesh.
Okay, what does it mean?
Fate, destiny.
Fate, kader.
Kader.
Kadash.
Kader. Yes.
Kadash.
Yes.
Thank you. And I've been getting a lot of questions about that, and because I think the Turkish people are very interested in that concept, and certainly my first book deals a lot talking about fate versus determinism. And my new book, Mobius, is also talking a lot about those same themes. And so I'm not religious. I don't believe in God, but I also don't believe that there's nothing. So, I think back and I think maybe it was a little fate. And so I came here, so like 2 weeks later or something like that, I'm on a plane and I'm flying over to Turkey. I'd never been here before. Egeman meets me and he's my publisher and he's the nicest, most enthusiastic person like probably I've ever met in my life. And he's a big reason why my book is successful because he just believed in my novel, my first novel. And when it came out, it wasn't popular. And he tells the story, and it had a green cover. And he thought, it will be more popular if it was black and white. How his head went from A to B, I have no idea.
He must be a marketing guy.
He's just he's a people person. He's an everything guy. You know, it's his publishing company. He's editor in chief, and he's like a visionary, right? But he believed in it, and so he helped will the book to be successful.
And I think, when someone believes in something even more than you, in some cases, makes you believe in the same way.
Right.
Sometimes I feel like I'm not believing in something, but he believes in a very strong way. If he's into it, why don't I push myself even more? Because he's seeing the potential.
Have you ever heard about Sixto Rodriguez, Sugarman?
Yes, I know.
Ever
Searching
heard
for
about?
Sugarman.
Yes, he was in 70s. He was making rock music. His records didn't sell in the United States, and he kept working, I think, in construction. And he didn't know he was a big star in South Africa.
Right.
So his fans came up to him and said, like, "Hey, we thought you were dead," because back then there was no internet, obviously, and they couldn't find any information about him. So the rumors came up, like, oh, he's dead, like he's in depression, he's not making music anymore. Meanwhile, the guy was like, oh, my dream is dead, and I have to work in construction. So from one day to the other one, he flies over to South Africa, and thousands of people are awaiting him, and he's a big rock star over there. We have talked about this story before in the show, and we were like, yeah, sometimes just because you didn't find the right audience or the right person doesn't mean you're worthless. Right. So it needs to match so your worth is seen. Yeah,
I think there's a crazy amount of luck. I think there's maybe a little bit of fate. I think there's maybe some cultural differences, right? But like the countries where I did do well, and in no country am I as popular as I am here, but in Germany and Japan, my book was a big seller. And I wouldn't say Germany and Japan and Turkey have like a ton of cultural
almost nothing
similarities, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's where a part of it. And again, my first book was talking a lot about probability theory, and I have a background in statistics. And I've often said, because my book was translated into 20 languages, I had 20 bites at the apple. I don't know if you know that expression, right? 20 chances, 20 rolls of the dice, and it kind of comes out like a bell curve. Yeah. And most of the time when you roll the dice, you lose. Yeah. And then Japan and Germany, I won a little bit, and Turkey hit it big. Is it fate? Is it the Turkish people's, interest in fate? It's one of those things where, like people always say, why is it successful in Turkey? And I could theorize all day long, and I have lots of theories. Yeah. I was here, and I knew I was really popular, but I still didn't quite believe it, and it didn't internalize. And in the United States, I've never, ever, ever, ever met anybody who has read my book who I didn't already know. And when I get to the hotel, the Radisson in Istanbul, the bellman who was carrying my bags kept looking back at me, and it was like a little bit weird. And then Egeman says, "It's because he knows who you are. It's because he's read your books." I was like, no. And he said, "Have you read Fawer's books?" And he says, "Of course." And it was the first time I had ever met someone like in the wild who had read my book.
How did it feel?
It still felt like this is, and again, I'm a numbers guy. I was like, it's an outlier. And I thought, it's not really real, or maybe he's just being polite. Yeah. And then the next day I went to the Istanbul Book Fair, and I was the keynote speaker. First, they bring me into this giant room, and they said, "This is where you're going to be speaking." And I had my two best friends come with me because I was like, if it's awesome, it'll be great. And if it's terrible, it'll be a funny story. Right.
Makes
And
sense.
so when I'm looking at the room and I'm looking at my friends and I was like, I'm going to be so embarrassed when nobody shows up.
Yeah.
And then I came out and the room's like standing room only. And that's when I like really realized like, oh, I'm actually really popular here. And so looping back to, and sorry, I'm a little long-winded, but looping back to why are you so popular in Turkey? I said at the time, someone asked me, and I said, I've thought a lot about this. I thought really hard, and I think there's only one answer. And I said, Turkish readers are the smartest readers in the world. And that brought the house down. People
Makes
like
sense.
that.
I'm just curious because we're talking about improbable. Have you seen the movie Next, where Nicolas Cage?
No,
Yeah.
it's funny. I didn't. That movie came out after my book came out.
Yes. Is it a coincidence? That's why I'm asking. I
never
wouldn't
know.
I wouldn't say it's like it's the same thing,
Right.
but
A similar concept.
yes, because in 2005, Improbable was published. In 2007, there was a movie where a guy could see a little bit into the future in a more fiction way, of course. And then he's being chased for this. And then at the end of the movie, he makes such a great plan where he escapes all his enemies with his talent. So does this ring a bell? I would say.
It does. And the way it works in the United States is because I had a great publisher in HarperCollins, I got a Hollywood agent. And he printed out my book, my manuscript, and it was like all around these Hollywood producers. And nobody, it almost got made into a movie a couple times, but just didn't work. But there was one scene, they were writing Spider-Man 2, this goes back, but they were writing Spider-Man 2 at the time.
Okay.
And there's this one scene in Spider-Man 2 where they're sitting at the diner and he uses his spider sense and he realizes a car is going to come crashing through
I remember.
the window and he knocks her
that,
down.
yeah.
And so in that, I always thought that scene was ripped off from Improbable. But who knows?
I mean, we are not in the States, so I can say it. I think it's most probably inspired by your book.
Right.
I would say, yeah. You're a numbers guy. It makes sense. It's very straightforward logic.
I'm a numbers guy. I'm a bit of a pessimist. All of my jobs outside of writing have involved a lot of math. And I used to run online marketing for an internet company. And this is almost part of the inspiration for Improbable. But what you see is, and this was in the late 90s, early 2000s, you'd have 1 million ads run, 1 million impressions, 1 million people would see it, and you would always have a click rate of 1%, whether it's 1 in the morning or 12 in the afternoon, and the click rate is just constant, right? And it's sort of a little bit weird, why doesn't it vacillate? And it's just because, and this is again how I see the world, it's my bias. But it's just because 1% of the people, even though they're an entirely different group of people hour to hour, just do the same thing. And so I do think that the world follows these patterns, has these constraints of numbers around it. And so that's how I look at things.
Yeah, but doesn't this make us feel like it's some kind of simulation? Some kind of code running?
Right. It does feel... I don't believe that we're in a simulation. I love that theory. I've read a lot about that theory, and Elon Musk believes. If I was Elon Musk, I would also believe that I was in a simulation because he seems like he's the main character of the universe, and everybody else is my kids call it NPCs, non-player characters. So I understand why he thinks that. That seems incredibly depressing point of view to me.
Yeah, but it's not far away from what you are saying, actually. You just don't use these words.
Yeah, but I just think things end up in this way, right? That everybody has different backgrounds, different motivations, different beliefs. But when you have enough observations, enough numbers, that patterns form, and there are percentages there, and I just see it everywhere, and I believe it. Sometimes you create a piece of art, and other people interpret it in a way that you didn't mean. Yeah. And sometimes the other people might be right and saw something that I was trying to put out there that I couldn't even like quite grasp. The art belongs to the viewer.
Exactly.
It doesn't belong to the creator, right? And it's put out there for people to look and interpret and riff upon.
Yeah.
And it's been reflected back to me so often. Everybody's the main character of their own story, their own life, right? And no one wants to think of themselves as just a number. And when I say talk about good fortune, I knock on wood, so I am like not, I am a little bit superstitious on that type of thing. And I wouldn't do that. And I very much believe in don't talk about something good that could happen. You could jinx it, right? And so that's not something a mathematical person would do.
Yeah.
But that is something that I do. So
I also would love to hear about the process of how you started to write the novel, right? Because you only told the story from the part of where you have published it. How was the first day you sat down and said like, okay, I'm going to write this down? And what was the sparkle that first inspired the characters? We would love to listen to that.
It's a story that begets a story that begets a story. So I'll go back a little bit. I was working at a startup, a New York startup.
Okay.
And I decided I was going to quit that startup to do my own new startup. And I went in to quit that job at 6 in the morning because I always got there early. I quit to my boss 6 in the morning, September 11th, 2001, in New York City.
Wow.
About an hour before the planes hit.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, what a coincidence.
Yeah, or fate or something, right?
I don't know. I don't say it, man.
I say it.
Oz says it. So I do that. And that day turns out to be pretty much the worst day in history to quit a job to create a new company in New York City.
Yes.
But I'm super stubborn. And so a week later, when we're back in the office and things are like still very tense, but calming down a little bit, my boss, the CEO, pulls me into his office. He was like, you can take it back. You should just stay.
Second chance. Yeah.
He wanted me to stay anyway. And he was like, you're crazy. This is wrong move. So I quit to do that startup. It was a terrible fucking idea, a bad timing. And the startup itself was a good idea, and I won't go into it. It doesn't matter. But the point is that we couldn't raise any capital because the markets were so tight that time in New York. And so I was pretty upset and felt like I failed because I had failed. It took about like 8-9 months to fail. Like summer of 2002, it was like, okay, my new company had failed.
Yeah.
And around that time, I think like a lot of people in New York almost had a little post-traumatic stress disorder, right?
Of course, yeah.
And it was weird living in New York City at that time. And I started to feel like an existential crisis. Like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I didn't like this whole experience.
How old were you back then?
32. 31. So meanwhile, I was 31 years old. I had a very good friend named Stephanie Williams. She was 30 years old. Right at that time, she was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer.
Wow.
So, and my dad had died of skin cancer when he was 49. And my dad had never liked his job. And I thought, and again, with like 9/11 and everything, you just started to feel a sense of your own mortality. You know, I wasn't in Wall Street often, but I went sometimes. Like that could have been me. You know, I could have died. So I thought, I'm wasting my time. And my friend Stephanie, she was a journalist, but she had always wanted to write a book. And I had always wanted to write a book. And I just thought, I'm wasting my time. I could die at any moment. I need to like pursue my dreams. And so I said to her, I said, why don't we write a book together? Like not the same book, but we would go to Starbucks and you bring your laptop, I bring my laptop. We sit next to each other and we write for 2 hours because back then that's how long the battery lasted and there were no plugs. And we started to write, and that's how I started my book. That's like why I started my book, and it was after I had a failure, because I was feeling sad about my father, because I had not liked my previous job, because my friend was dying. And
How is she now?
She passed away.
She passed away.
She passed away.
So sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, so it was all these awful things in my life that led to what has become, besides my children, like the most special thing in my life.
And you have, can we say that you have seen that life is so unexpected? I think there's a point for everyone that you need to sit down and talk with yourself. But you have to ask the right questions and maybe give the right answers with no lies, with no, shiny things. You have to be just honest
Right.
to yourself.
No, I was about to say the key thing that you said there is it's not necessarily even the right questions and the right answers, because I think we all know the right questions. We know the right answers. It's about being honest with yourself. Yeah. And really, it's hard to face unpleasant truths.
Yeah.
Right? And face your failings and to admit, like, I hate my job.
Yeah.
Or
you know what to do, actually.
And you know what to do. And typically, and not to minimize, like, people have all sorts of difficulties, right? But I was in a position where I was fortunate enough that I had talent and the financial stability to pursue my dream. And so I decided that it's foolish not to.
100%.
And so, but it's a hard realization to do. And the big thing that was holding me back was I kind of didn't want to try, because I thought if I try and I fail, then it's over.
I love that.
Right?
But which is worse, like not trying or not knowing that what's going to happen if you try? Because
it depends. At least for me, it depends where my head is at any given moment. Sometimes I have emails that I get, and I know there's like good news or bad news in them, and I don't open them for a couple of days. And it's sort
I
of
know
like,
that feeling. I know that feeling.
It's sort of like quantum mechanics, where there's like Schrodinger's cat, right?
Yeah.
Where you don't know if the cat's alive or dead until you open the box and observe it.
Yeah.
And so there's some pieces of information out there that are like might be sitting in my inbox or a proverbial inbox, where I could know it if I reached out to a person and asked a question. And I don't want to do that, because I want to keep the dream alive. And so it's about your fear over knowledge. But I have a good friend who's like a Hollywood agent, and she was giving me some advice, and she just said something along the lines of, there's information out there. It's already been decided. You need to get that information, and it probably will be something you don't want to hear, but the sooner you hear it, the sooner you can fix it or move on.
Yeah.
And it's true, but it still takes courage to try to get that information.
But from all the things you said, you're a great entrepreneur, because a great entrepreneur is, in my opinion, measured by how much actually defeat they can take. Right? And how much you can resist the pain of failure.
Endurance, yes.
Yes, it's all about that. I mean, of course, you need to be smart and this and that. You need to be overall strong to be a great entrepreneur.
And lucky.
100%. But I think first you need to be very good with pain and confronting bad news. And then you need all these other features to become overall successful. And you have done it. When you almost think your dream has died for a long time, and then you fly over to a country you have never been,
right,
and thousands of people are awaiting you there, and they have read your book, you have touched their heart, right? So what kind of a startup money can replace that?
There's
right?
nothing that can replace. I've had like kind of two, and it's been different because I was here in 2009, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And and then even after I was here and like my dream was real,
yeah,
and there were people reading my books, and it felt fantastic, but I still had to go back home and work my startup job.
This is very hard, isn't it?
It was so hard, but at that time I had a family, so I didn't see that I had a choice. Because I needed, because I'm kind of a conservative guy and believe in numbers, and I felt that the most important thing is to provide for my sons. So my dream is over here, but my sons are over here. My sons need me, so I had to like kind of walk away from that dream, and I said to myself, I'm really going to try to come back, but I don't know if I can. Not back to Turkey yet, but back to my dream.
I understand.
So and so I ultimately had better startup success, which brought me back to writing. And I'd really kind of given up. As I said before, my dad passed away when he was 49, a week before his 50th birthday. And as and 4 years ago, as I started to approach 50, it was like a little scary, right? Because you think of your father, and I love my father. I was very close to my father. But your father is someone who's like always older, always wiser than you. So the idea that I was about to hit an age that he never reached, that every day I would be older than he ever became, it was hard for me to wrap my head around. And again, I was working at this startup, and my startup had finally done well. I had all the startup success more than I ever thought possible, as I was the chief operating officer, chief financial officer of a healthcare tech startup. And and then when I hit 50, I thought, and my dad was somebody who was super smart, smarter than me, smartest guy I ever met, but he had a job that he didn't like.
It's so funny because you said that you were almost at the same age that your father passed away, but we have a song with the exact same words.
Yeah, the song says, "It's my birthday and I'm in a bar sitting on a stool at the exact same age that my dad passed away."
Yeah, I mean, it's like you were saying, or like I was saying, it's just like, it was like hard to wrap your head around it. And yeah, my dad still is like a yardstick, that I measure myself against. And I was wrestling with leaving my company, and again, I achieved a lot of success, and I had 3,000 people working for me. I had a lot of respect from people. And there were aspects of my job I liked and aspects I didn't, just like most jobs. But it wasn't my dream. And I also knew if I left, I was leaving a lot of money on the table. Yeah. So I was wrestling with it, and it was during the pandemic, and I walked around with my friend Andy, who old college roommate, and he had come with me to Turkey 15 years ago. Okay. Wow. And I was saying, and we're walking through the streets, and the streets are sort of empty, and it feels like post-apocalyptic. And I was wearing a mask, even though it was outside, and he wasn't wearing a mask, and we were talking about that. But I said, "What do you think I should do?" And I knew the answer, right? Like I knew the answer that I should quit and write another book. And we were talking about my dad, and he said, your dad never had a third act, right? And you have this opportunity to have a third act. And that's when I knew it's sort of like I was doing it for myself, but also like for my father, because he didn't have the opportunity to do what I did. And he also was locked in a job that he didn't like for money, right? So I just knew that even though I was giving up a lot of money, this was more, writing another book, telling another story was more important to me, because I think I'm better at that than I am at anything else. And so you should do kind of your calling,
What do you think? Can you do it both? Is this possible ever? To not leave the job, but also be...
For me?
Yeah, for you or for anyone. Do you think that's possible?
Oh, for some people, sure. But for me, writing, it's like a little, it's hard to get the good story out, and it's pretty consuming. And it takes a lot of headspace. So even though I only write for a few hours a day, the other hours I'm thinking about it, right? And so I can't do, and startups, that's something I'm good at. Startups is, and this is really what Mobius is about, my new book, it's all consuming. It sucks up your life. And so Oz I wrote while I was doing startups, but I wrote it like in the middle of the night or on weekends. And it took me years. And I'm very happy with that book, but it was just so taxing. It was too much. And like I have my family and I have my job and I was trying to be a writer. And I do think that in life you have to make hard decisions. And so the hard decision I made first was to say no to writing. And then the hard decision I made later on was to say yes.
You couldn't explain it better. Thank you very much. When you were talking about Mobius.
Yes, right? I was going to say something.
I've just one stupid question about it. Because you're a startup person, you had many startup ideas. Did you ever realistically think you could have a startup about time traveling?
No, I'm not that big of a dreamer. But
it's not a stupid question, by the way.
Thank you.
It's going to happen in the future.
Maybe, you don't know.
Maybe it's already happened.
Yeah, maybe. You never know.
Yeah.
So.
What was the process? I was like, maybe you had like for a 1 second thought of like, oh my God, could I have a startup about time traveling? Because in New York, it's so competitive to have a startup.
Right. The sparking idea really for me in time travel is more of, it's a device, it's a metaphor, but it's about regret, right? The older you get. And I think I'm very blessed. I'm definitely very blessed to be here. I've had bad things in my life. I've had fantastic things in my life. But, and so mostly I don't regret, mostly people, different interviews, someone asked, like, if you could go back, what would you change something?
That would be my next question. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, so I had sort of two halves of this. If you go back and change something, like, would you, or what would it be? And I wouldn't, because I believe in sort of the butterfly effect, that everything's connected, right? And my sons right now are both like very happy, very healthy. Enjoying their life. My younger son just turned 18, and my older son turns 20 in January.
Wow.
Amazing.
So
do they like writing?
No.
Or reading, maybe?
I've gotten them more into reading, and that's something I really pushed, but it's hard with screens. You know? They like Instagram a lot.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't nowadays?
And my younger son plays a lot of League of Legends.
Okay.
Wow.
And a ton of video games. But they're reading more now, which really makes me happy. Yeah. But it's, kids read less than we did because there's so many more distractions. I was talking about like if I could go I could go back and change something, I wouldn't, because like, God forbid if there was this weird chain reaction and something happened to one of my sons because of it. Right. So like, that's the most important thing in my life, my sons. So I wouldn't change anything. But if I could go back and it wouldn't change anything, then I'd just spend a day with my father, before he passed, before he got sick. So I could know him as an adult, because I only knew him. I was 22, right? So I knew him. I was a child, so I could and we were close, but like not peers. Yeah, and like imagine being able to like talk to my father as a peer, and about my life. That would be something I would like.
If you have a chance to go back to have more time with your father, would you prefer going back by knowing that your father will pass away in that certain date, or not knowing?
Yeah, I think a lot about these things. I've thought a lot about that. I would want to know because, the expression like, you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone,
Yeah.
right?
Unfortunately.
So if you go back knowing, then you go back with the ability to really appreciate it more. And then, from my perspective, it would be more special, right?
I agree.
I mean, yeah. You're going to make me cry today.
I sometimes compare your works with George Orwell. Comparison between past and present and future, and having the ability to foresee some kind of future events. Have you ever influenced by some authors, just like George Orwell or someone else? Can you share your favorite authors?
So
Good question.
Great question.
Thank you.
So my favorite author is probably Stephen King.
Makes sense.
And part of the reason, I have a lot of vision problems, and I've had vision problems since I was 6 years old. And so for many years, so I have no vision in my left eye and poor vision in my right eye. And for
I'm sorry, if you feel comfortable talking about it, I think a lot of your fans
Sure.
are curious about this. Like,
Sure.
what kind of specific situation is this?
I had an illness called Steven Johnson syndrome, which results in scarring all over the body. So, and it's centered in my eyes. So my corneas are scarred, and my glands are scarred. So I can't cry.
Oh,
I use like artificial tears
okay.
because my eyes don't produce tears.
Interesting.
So a couple times during this, I feel like I would have cried if I could have cried.
Wow.
But and so I had many surgeries. I was in and out of the hospital from the ages of 6 to 11 or 12. And so a lot of times I had eye surgery, so my eye was patched. And this is, I'm old, so I'm dating myself a little bit, but this is 70s, 80s. And there weren't audiobooks, but there's an organization in the United States called Commission for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. And that organization made what they called then talking books. And they were just tapes. And they would mail you, they would send you tapes in the mail.
Nice.
And so my dad, so when I first lost my vision, my dad learned about this. My dad was a big reader, and he got the catalog, and I couldn't see, and I didn't know Braille yet. So my dad chose the books for me, and my dad always joked. He was a funny guy, but he always used to say, "I never talked to you when you were a kid until you're smart enough to talk back." And we had a great relationship because he always talked to me like I was an adult. And so even though I was 6.5, he chose all the books that we would listen to. Because also I think he was like a little bit selfish, and I'm a little bit selfish too, that he didn't want to be bored listening to some dumb kid's book.
Makes sense.
So we listened to like science fiction classics, like a lot of Isaac Asimov and Foundation, and a lot of Stephen King. And so the reason that authors are my heroes and that I always wanted to be an author is because, you know, I spent a lot of time in the hospital, and then it's night and your parents have to go home, right? And so you're alone and you're blind.
And you were
6, 7,
Wow.
8, 9. So you're alone and you're blind. And so all I had were my stories,
imagination.
the books, the talking books that I could listen to. And so I like to think I'm a good storyteller, and that part of that comes from really listening to stories. And I would just listen to books all the time because my parents would have to leave the hospital at 7 or 8 at night, and I was scared I couldn't sleep. So I was like up really late, and I just like listen to books. So my dad ordered me a lot of Stephen King.
Wow.
Even though maybe that's not the thing you should listen to when you're 7 years old and you're blind and in the dark and alone. But I loved it. And so and he's just such a fantastic storyteller that it's not so much he influenced me or Isaac Asimov influenced me, but it's the experience of learning that a writer has this magic ability to take you away
from where you are,
from wherever you are. And that was a gift that I got again and again from all these great writers. And so the biggest compliment I ever get is when someone tells me how, there are two compliments I get that make me feel the best. And one is how, like, people have said, like, your book saved my life or changed my life or something like that. And I don't know how that is, but it makes me feel really good. And then the other thing a couple people said to me the last few days is, this was either the first book I ever loved or the first book I ever read. And that suggests to me that, like, my book helped start them on a journey of reading. And reading is one of the most important things to me. So if I was the reason that got somebody into reading, like, that's great. And I also that was the other thing I got yesterday is, I dedicated Improbable to my father. And it's not that I forgot that I dedicated it to him, but, you know, when you sign the book, you turn the page to go to the right page.
Yeah.
And I passed the dedication page.
Yeah.
And I saw his name there. Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen his name, like, just written in print in years, right? Because it's been over 30 years since he passed away. And it just made me really just the knowledge that all these people have seen his name, you know?
It's the biggest honor, maybe.
You know, it's just like, so, you know, I just appreciate, like, all the Turkish people that, like, I feel like they keep him alive in a way.
Can I shake your hand?
And thank you too, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you. This was really special, and I've done other interviews, and some have been comical, some have been serious. This was, like, a very different experience than I expected, but one I really enjoyed. And I just want to say to also all the viewers, and let me know if I get this right, but Türkiye seni seviyorum, and Türkiye sizi seviyorum.
The man, the legend, Adam Fawer was with us today, and we feel really honored. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.